morning, guys. What's up? My name is Jaya and I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on bookish related content. So today's video is actually going to be the October reading wrap-up, which is one of my favorite ones to film. I love doing these monthly reading wrap-ups and just talking about all the wonderful books that have been consumed over the course of the month. That being said, let's hop into the video. It's reading time here at JB's Corner. For those of you that are new here, welcome to the channel. I love books. This is one thing that I think is deep down embedded in my soul, the love for books. I love a good fiction story. I love being transported into a new world, looking at things from different perspectives. And so it is just such a joy and passion to talk all things books. And this community that we're cultivating here at JB's Corner has been absolutely wonderful and incredible in supporting me on this reading journey. I spent a solid 10 years in school, and so it was study, textbook, and I didn't have the same ability to consume books that I do now, which is why I was inspired to start doing this. That being said, reading wrap-ups are my absolute favorite because I do feel like it's really fun to see what actually got read over the course of the month outside of the TBR. I love a good TBR video. I love a good wrap-up video. For those of you that are new here, if bookish content sounds like something you may enjoy with a little bit of randomness here and there, some vlogs, travels, things like that, then you're definitely in the right spot. Consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. Would love to have you back to watch all of the videos and to enjoy all the bookish content. For those of you that are returning, I cannot thank you enough for being here, for helping me build this community. It means the absolute world to me. So now let's jump into the books. The first two books that I'm going to actually share, I ended up reading on my Kindle in combination with Audible, and that is Pumpkin Everything and Maple Sugar Crush. These books are written by, I'm finding out right now for you guys. Give me just a second. Woo! Usually I'm better prepared than this. This book was written by I'm sorry, I don't know what it's doing. Beth Labonte, and she basically has written this series about a small little town called Autumnboro, and basically the vibes of the book is very, very cute, very sweet. And essentially in this book, we have a young woman who ends up returning back to her hometown of Autumnboro, where she hasn't been in years because her grandfather ends up sustaining an accident and her mother is convinced that he needs to be put into a home. She wants to make sure that her grandfather gets to stay in his home and wants to help him rebuild. But the fear of going back to this town after 10 years is that she's going to have to see her childhood love, her childhood crush, and deal with the fact that there are still some unrequited feelings there. She's also coming off of a terrible breakup. She was actually engaged to be married and it didn't pan out. And everything in the wedding was themed on pumpkin, which is everything that Autumnboro meant to her. So going back is really causing her to reestablish a connection with this hometown of hers, as well as really figuring out where she feels like she needs to repair some relationships and find herself in this town again. She also ends up running into her ex, of course, and we get to see their little storyline in this book, which is the primary focus of the book. Outside of that, this young woman also writes horror novels, and so she has written horror novels at the liberty of many of the people that live in Autumnboro, and she kind of takes these characters and turn them into caricatures. And now as each person is reading her books, they get more and more frustrated with her, and so she's also having to deal with that little dilemma as well. But overall, the book was very cute, it was very sweet, it was very enjoyable, it was very fall, very autumnal, perfect for the October season, and I did end up thoroughly enjoying this book, and I gave it a 3-star. We read this for my book club, Paper and Glam, and I ended up enjoying this book so much, and I also saw that it was now a Hallmark movie, and I love a good Hallmark movie, so I was like, you know what, I have to read the next one. So I ended up reading Maple Sugar Crush as well. I'm so sorry. This is just being cover. That's where I want to go. So Maple Sugar Crush is the second book in the series, also by Beth Labonte, and this is now following a second character. The main female character in this book was actually introduced in the previous book. She is a young woman that ended up getting very lucky and winning the lottery, and she now wants to do good things with that money. She doesn't want to be corrupt by it. Her biggest fear is that her family and her friends are only there because of her money, and the more she succumbs to giving them the money, the more that she is encouraging them to continue their negative behavior. So her only goal in life is to basically give back to small towns and individuals that really need the money in order to grow. She's also trying to find romance for herself, but she can't figure out whether or not someone is there for her money or for her. Her ex, who she thought she was going to marry, ends up running away, and she's a little bit heartbroken after that. The story follows this main female character, as well as the younger brother of the main love interest from the previous book. And so it's really cute, still set in Autumnborough, very, very sweet. And we kind of get to see our main character navigate the town and their suspicions of her as to whether or not she's there for the right intentions. Her kind of figuring out who her real friends are. Do they really care about her, or do they just use her for their money? And also watching her go through this very sweet romance where there's also a fake dating trope involved in this book as well. Overall, I thought this book was also very sweet, a solid 3-star read. Nothing to necessarily write home about, but very cute, very seasonal, very appropriate for October. The books from there did end up taking a slightly darker turn, not gonna lie, but we'll start with the lighthearted books first and then jump into some of the darker books. So the first book that I ended up reading was Road Trip with a Vampire. I actually spoke more about this book in my video, Outfits Match the Book. I will definitely post that. I just felt like it was such a fun video to do that one as well because it was October, and in October you dress up because of Halloween. But that's neither here nor there. This book was absolutely adorable. This is by Jenna Levine, and it is actually the third book in the Vampire series. The first one is My Vampire is a Roommate. The second one is Fake Date with a Vampire, and then this one is Road Trip with a Vampire. And it was, I'm just double checking to make sure that second title is correct. My Roommate is a Vampire is definitely accurate. The other, My Vampire Plus One, that's what the other book is called. But this is the third book in the series. So in the first book, we follow Friedrich. In the second one, we follow Friedrich's best friend, Reginald. And in this one, we are following Zelda. Zelda is the witch that used to be the best friend of Reginald and was involved in all the different escapades that he finds himself in that got him into trouble in the first place with the very large overbearing collective, which is a group of old school vampires that are basically of the belief that vampires should be like all scary vampires are in every other story, and that they should all come from the original lineage of vampires. Basically very full of them people. And Reginald and Zelda end up getting into the collective and causing mischief and mayhem years ago, which then led to certain unfortunate events. So they've kind of been on the lowdown. Now, that being said, there is a vampire who shows up on Reginald's doorstep and basically claims that he has amnesia. So he decides he's going to send this vampire on down to his friend Zelda in order to see if our young witch can help him find his memories again. Now, the problem is Zelda herself is living in this small town and she just wants a normal life. She just started working at a yoga studio. Like, her life is doing better. She's trying to remove herself from vampires. She's trying to figure out whether or not she even wants to be a witch, how to hide these things. And so when this young vampire shows up on her doorstep, she doesn't know what to do with herself. Needless to say, because Zelda is a kind-hearted person, she ends up helping our main vampire in this book, Peter, to go cross-country to try to recover his memories. They get caught up with the collective and a lot of other crazy things happen during the course of this road trip, but altogether the love story was very sweet and it was very cute. I will say, as far as the Jenna Levine books goes, the very first one was my favorite, the second one was my second favorite, and this was probably the least favorite of the three books, but it was still a fun, enjoyable read, and I did end up giving it a 3-star. I had been waiting for this book, and I was so excited when it came out this October. Ali Hazelwood wrote a book called Bride, which came out, I want to say last year, which was her first supernatural paranormal romance that she came out with. That book followed the story of Misery, a vampire, and her love interest, a werewolf. And the two species don't get along, so it was really cute to watch the story between Lo and Misery and it start to evolve. This book is now following the best friend, Serena, and her relationship with Cohen, who happens to be the werewolf alpha of the Northern tribe. Serena is half werewolf, half human, and she's a newly discovered species. She only knows of one other of her type, which is the young niece of Lo, who we met in the first book with Misery. Now, in this book, Serena wants to protect that child at all costs, and she wants to protect her friends. She's also been given some crazy diagnosis by her doctor as she tries to navigate this world that she's been thrust into now that it's been discovered that she's a vampire. And she and Cohen are mates, which we know from the beginning of the book, but they're basically trying to avoid the mate bond and the mate ritual for various reasons. Throughout the course of this book, people are basically hunting Serena to try to figure out, what she is, who she is, what her background is, her original family, who they might be. And we go through a lot of crazy things throughout the course of the book. The romance between Cohen and Serena is absolutely adorable. It was really fun to read. The craziness that ensues in this book was also very interesting to read. Lots of cultish vibes, lots of interesting stories that are happening simultaneously within this book and this book thread. But most importantly, the relationship between Serena and Misery was absolutely adorable to read in this book as well. So I would say that this was, just as I anticipated, a very fun read, very exciting. I couldn't give more details on this book at this time because of the fact that it is part of a series, but I do believe I will be filming a more detailed video on Bride and Mate together as a series in the duology. And if you are interested, definitely check that video out as well. But overall, I did end up giving this book a 4-star. I really enjoyed this book, and I have been recently having issues with Ali Hazelwood books because I feel like a lot of them have been very formulaic and it has been taking away a little bit from the oomph of the stories, because I remember absolutely loving her very first book, The Love Hypothesis, and then all the other books felt very similar. So this was a nice, fun twist on those books, and I feel like while there is some spice in this book, that wasn't the primary focus. We got more character development, I felt, and more romance in the characters, and also more high stakes, which I think was really, really fun to read. So overall, again, 4-star read. Okay, so the next two books that I want to talk about are TJ Klune books. Now, I have to preface this by saying TJ Klune is one of my all-time favorite authors. I don't think I've read any of his books that have been below 4-star. Multiples of them have been 5 stars. So when I found out that he did a adult series that was based on werewolves and witches and vampires, I was like, I need to read this series, especially during the course of October. Now, here's the thing. The books are beautiful. They're gut-wrenchingly beautiful. They're heartbreakingly beautiful, but they're long. Each of them is about 600 pages. I was hoping to get through all 4 books in the month of October. I did not succeed, so I will be finishing the other 2 books over the course of this month, but I did get a chance to read both Wolfsong and Ravensong. These are beautiful books showcasing romance, self-love, growth, individual independence, as well as found family, and it's just such an amazing series. I'm already obsessed. So the first book is following Oxnard, who is a wonderful individual. He's a young boy who has gone through heck and back. His father left when he was just a young boy. He's been told his entire life that he's slow, that he would never amount to anything, and the only people that really shower him with love are his mother and Gordo, who happens to be the mechanic in town, and his clan of young friends. Needless to say, as the book progresses, there is a family that moves in down the street, and a young boy named Joe, at the prime age of 10 years old, meets our main character, Oxnard, who's about 3 to 4 years older than him, and basically decides that this is an amazing human that he must connect with. And after the two of them meet, Oxnard ends up getting introduced to the Bennett family, without realizing that the Bennett family are actually werewolves. They are not just any werewolf either. They are the royalty within werewolves, and they believe in protecting everyone equally, all the werewolf clans. And the Bennett line has actually been established as the alpha of all the werewolf packs. So throughout the course of this book, we come to learn that Jo has gone through some crazy, crazy things, and Oxnard and Jo end up building a connection. We watch their story as they grow through the ages, and we basically get to follow Oxnard's story in relation to the Bennets, in relation to Green Creek, in relation to the town, the people there, from a very young age all the way into adulthood, culminating in battles and craziness that ends up happening within the world of the supernatural. In this book, Oxnard is a human, but he's a very unique human being and therefore is able to bring a sense of camaraderie and home and safety to the people around him, and he steps up whenever he is required to do so. This was one of the most beautiful, heart-wrenching books I have ever read. I absolutely adored Wolfsong. I will say that all TJ Klune books do tend to be stories of men. What am I trying to say? They're same gender relationships. So I just want to put that out there. I do think, however, that the way he writes the book, the way he tells the story, it's just incredible. It is a beautiful, 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 beautiful book. I absolutely adore it. And I love the fact that he has found a space to do this safely in such a interesting world that we're living in right now. And he's also done it in a way that just will speak to any human being, in my humble opinion. Beautifully written book. Would definitely recommend. This was a solid 5-star read for me. Then moving into the second book in this series, we have Ravensong. Now, Ravensong follows a new character, kind of sort of picking up from where the previous book left off, while also having a little bit of back history story, just kind of showcasing the story of Gordo himself. Gordo is a very, very, very important character in the first book and basically is the lifeline for Oxnard from childhood into adulthood. He is the grounding factor in reality for Ox while simultaneously being involved in the world of the supernatural. We find out at the end of the first book, or not the end, but throughout the course of the first book, that Gordo has basically become the Bennet witch, meaning that he is the witch that helps the werewolves and basically acts as their, what's the word I'm looking for? Not quite their tether, but kind of acts as their, connection to the earth and the magic around them, and helps create a balance between the source of magic around them, the werewolves themselves, the humans, and all these other things. Gordo has gone through a lot since childhood. There's been a lot that has been put on his shoulders unfairly. There's been a fallout that happened between him and the Bennet pack that is then slightly repaired in the previous book. But this is basically the story of Gordo. We get to see the current time storyline of what happened with Gordo in the previous book, where he was missing for a few of the chapters. We also get to tell what happens afterwards, the aftermath events that have occurred since the ending of the first book from Gordo's perspective. But we also get the backstory of Gordo and Mark, his love interest, and Mark happens to be a werewolf with the Bennet pack as well. And their story was absolutely adorable to read. And I just think that this book was also very well done. I will say that this book felt a little bit slower to me, which did kind of get to me a little bit. I think the flashbacks, the way they were done, was a little off for me in this book. But that being said, when I say off, it doesn't take away from the overall storyline or the quality of the book. It was just there were certain scenes where you were getting past and present at the same time, and it just caught me off guard sometimes, where I had to go back and reread the chapter. For that reason and that reason alone, I did end up giving this book a 4-star compared to the 5-star for Wolfsong. But that is not going to prevent me from reading the rest of the books. I still loved the telltale story, and I loved hearing it from Gordo's perspective. That also caught me off guard, though, in the beginning. So I will say this, every single book in this series is told in the perspective of a different individual. So keep that in mind. I was definitely hoping to get more of Oxnard and Jo in this, and we did not. We got more of Gordo in this story, but I still think it was a beautiful book, and I can't wait to read the next one. From there, I ended up reading the third book in a series that I actually thought was going to be the final book in the series, only to find out that there will be 3 more. But that is okay. That is none other than The Damned by Harper L. Woods. This book was very entertaining. It was very fun. It was very well written. The only thing I had to say about this book is, again, it caught me off guard because the first 2 books are told from the perspective of our main character, Willow, and Alaric. And I was hoping to get more of those two characters. However, this picks up from where the previous book ended, and we actually get the perspectives of two new characters who are Margot and Beelzebub. To give a little bit of background, this is the third book in the Coven of Bones series, which is a series following the story of a bunch of witches and how their coven has basically tainted magic and the use of magic in hopes of establishing more security for themselves while separating themselves from vessels. Vessels are very similar to vampires. They are creatures that have been created by Lucifer himself in order to be on the land with the witches when he gave power to the first witch. And the goal is to basically create harmony between these creatures, which does not currently exist. In this book, at the end of the previous book, two of our characters actually end up in the middle of a battle down in hell. And now we have Margot, who happens to be a red witch, a witch who basically draws power from desire, sex, love, emotions like that. And she herself has been very scarred in this department. And so she's struggling with her own magical power and the binds that she's been placed in. She ends up, unfortunately or fortunately, unwittingly or wittingly, ensnaring the attention of Beelzebub, who happens to be the second in command to Lucifer himself. They find themselves down in hell, and now Beelzebub is convinced that he and Margot are going to make it through all 9 circles of hell in order to communicate with Lucifer to find the best way to get back to the land of the living and to help deal with the aftermath of the battle that happened at the end of the previous book. In this book, we get to see Margot's growth as a character, her kind of finding a way to find peace within herself, her own power, learning to understand herself better. We also get to see the romance between Beelzebub and Margot, which starts off very enemies to lovers, but is very sweet throughout the course of the book. We also get to travel through the various levels of hell, which to me was very reminiscent of like Dante's Inferno. I will say overall, this book was very enjoyable. It was entertaining. It was easy to read. It was fun. It was fast paced. However, it didn't quite hit home in the same way that the other two characters did for me. That being said, I will definitely be continuing the series, but this book ended up getting like a 3.5 star from me overall. So sorry. Short coffee break because my brain is still a little slow this morning. The next 2 books that I want to talk about are actually part of a series. Carissa Broadbent had written the Crowns of Nyaxia first set of duologies a couple years ago. And so now we have the second set of books in the Crown of Nyaxia duology. To give a little bit of background, in the first 2 books, we are basically following the House of Night, I want to say. And in this series, there are 3 different vampire kingdoms that exist simultaneously in comparison to the human worlds. Now, in this, we have gods from the pantheon who basically are worshipped by either the vampires or the humans. The gods that represent the humans basically want to destroy the House of Night and the creatures of night, which are the daughters and sons of Nyaxia, who happens to be the goddess of chaos, darkness, and of course the vampires. Her love interest, who was also a god, but the god of death, has been killed by his siblings, and the ashes have been kind of spread across the entire land. And so in the first book, we basically follow the story of Rain and Oriah. The 2 of them basically go through a competition in the first book, and at the end of the trials, they end up in a position where Rain has now become the king of the House of Night. It's in turmoil, it's falling apart, he's in love with Oriah, Oriah doesn't trust him, and eventually throughout the course of the second book, they find their way back to each other, and they end up creating a sense of camaraderie and equality within the House of Night vampire kingdom, and have also unfortunately made enemies with Nyaxia, who is of course the goddess of the vampires. In the second book, we are following another main character, Misha, who was introduced in the first 2 books and happens to be the best friend of Rain. Now, her story began when she was a human initially, and she prayed to the god of the sun. And basically, in the course of her time as a human, she basically becomes a, what is the word? a stewardess of a nun of his temple and is chosen by him to basically be his oracle as well as one of his chosen human brides. So in her quest, she's basically meant to be a missionary and spread the word of the God of Sun and basically bring joy and equality to everybody. However, in the course of her trying to do this, she ends up befriending a vampire and inadvertently turns into a vampire herself, which of course is the worst thing to do when the god you pray to is the sun god, who is the exact opposite of the goddess of night and the vampire children. So she is forsaken by her god. She has basically been trying to find a way to reconnect with her god. She's struggling with her vampirehood when all of a sudden she is kidnapped at the same kingdom where the prince who originally turned her into a vampire used to be, because she ends up killing that prince. While she's in prison, which is where the beginning of the book starts, she is basically recruited by one of the sons of the House of Shadows, which is the court that had turned her initially. And she is then pulled into a mission with him where basically they are trying to resurrect the dead lover of Nyaxia, who is the goddess slash queen of the vampires. So throughout the course of the first book, we basically get to see the story of her and Asar as they are basically going through these various levels of the underworld in order to find this dead god and basically bring him back. In the midst of all of this, she also ends up rekindling a relationship with the god of flame and fire and sun, and he basically gives her a separate task where she is then directed to essentially kill the god they're trying to resurrect at the last minute so that he doesn't come back. That is basically the story that is followed in the first book that was written, which is The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. More details about this book are also in my video where I matched the outfits to the book. So I'll definitely attach that video at the end of this. But this book was, I think, very cute, and the way that the book ended was kind of fascinating, very interesting, and it was definitely a fun read. This was a solid 4-star read for me. The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk then picks up where The Songbird and the Heart of Stone ended, and now at this point there is a god that is dead. They have basically been given a new task, and at this point they are just trying to figure out how to bring balance back to the world. Misha herself has made some interesting choices that has put her in a very interesting position. Asar and Misha have finally found the way to tell each other that, hey, I actually adore you and I love you, which is kind of cute. And now that they're back in the world of the living, there is also the fact that Rain and Araya now enter back into the story, and they are trying to rescue Misha when she doesn't exactly want to be rescued. So she's also dealing with the fallout of that. We also get to see a character that died in the first book come back in this book, which I thought was amazing because that was a character that I felt like I did want more from and I wanted to hear more about. So it was really fun to see Vincent's character return. He is the father of Araya. So that was also very interesting to read as well. Overall, it was very fun. In this book, we also get to see more of the turmoil between the different gods and all the different gods playing a varying set of roles throughout the course of this book as they either assist or delay the progress of Asar and Misha on their quest. We also get to see very interesting sides of the gods, which are honestly more human in nature. We get to see reactions of anger, jealousy, power hungriness, and all these things. But the only thing is, because they're gods, the impacts of the choices that they make and the consequences from them are much bigger than what you would see with human beings. It was overall, I think, a very fun book to read, and it, I think, set up for the next set of books very well, which I believe is going to be following the character of Septimus, who is from the House of Blood. So I think that overall this set of duology was very interesting in the Crown of Nyaxia series. Because of the fact that all the books kind of build upon one another, it's really hard to give too much detail about this book without reading the series, but I definitely think it's worth picking up and worth reading. Carissa Broadbent has done a beautiful job, and I know her new book will be releasing, I want to say either end of this year or sometime in early next year, and I'm very, very excited for those books to come out in order to complete this wonderful series. I ended up giving both of these books a solid 4-star. All right, guys, we're almost there. We're getting through the books. The next set of books I want to talk about is the Cat and Mouse duology, which is Hunting and Haunting Adeline. Okay, thoughts. This is probably not going to match what a lot of people feel. But before we even get into it, I just want to share how beautiful these are. I ended up getting these through an Etsy order, and I just think these are absolutely stunning copies of these books. The first book in the series is Haunting Adeline. Now, this is a stalker romance. We basically have a man who stalks the main female lead character in this book in order to basically court her in a way, but it's very much dark romance. So if people don't want dark romance and they don't want spice, don't read this book. Now, in the course of the book, we find out that our main character, who is stalking his female interest and basically trying to get her to fall in love with him by breaking her and then putting her back together, also happens to be a very important character because he is simultaneously taking down rings of corrupt elite politicians who are basically kidnapping and selling / abusing young women. So he's basically trying to destroy the flesh trade. I realize how ridiculous that sounds because this man is also stalking another woman and doing all these things. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Overall, the book is set in a very dark setting. Our main female character is an author. She's beautiful. She also kind of expresses in the very beginning of the book that she likes someone who's a little bit rougher. She doesn't necessarily want gentle in her partner, and she is looking for someone who causes her heart to race. She ends up inheriting the house that used to belong to her grandmother, which is old and creaky, but very, very beautiful and means something to her. So she ends up moving into this house, and as she's renovating it and going through the various areas of the houses, she ends up discovering journals that have been left behind by her great-grandmother, which also described that she went through something very similar with a stalker. Throughout the course of this book, Adeline is basically trying to decide whether she is deranged or if she is having Stockholm syndrome or if she is a normal human as she continues to interact with the stalker that has been quote unquote stalking her and is also starting to develop relationships or feelings for this man. Her best friend is also a hacker and also helps her promote her books. And she basically works within an organization that also helps to take down the sex trade and is basically actively moving against all of these monsters that are kidnapping these young women and basically putting them through hell. Our main male lead, as I mentioned, is a darker character, very sinister in his romantic interest towards Adeline, but he himself is trying to make strides to make changes in the world. He's a very interesting character. You definitely see a lot of shades of gray. So if you like a dark, morally gray character who is very much kind of villain vibes, but also will burn down the world for his love interest and is absolutely insane, this is the right book for you. I would say that this book in and of itself was pretty decent. It wasn't too dark. There is murder, gore, death, all these things that happened in this book, the stalking and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I thought this book was very entertaining. Now, this particular book, I ended up giving a 3-star. I did think it was a interesting and fun read, unique in its genre. And I did kind of have a vibe that I was walking into a dark romance book. This is not my usual genre of reading, but I would say overall it was fun. I still maintain that St. Abby's book, Stabby Abby, was definitely what caught my attention and pulled me into this genre, which is basically the story of a young woman who is a serial killer and a detective getting together. And that kind of what pushed me into the serial killer storyline. And then I also really loved Brynn Weaver's stories, which are a little bit lighter in the Ruinous Love trilogy, but basically, again, talking about that kind of serial killer, stalkerish vibe and romance, but that also has a little bit of hilarity to it. This is purely dark. There's also a lot of spice to the point where I ended up skipping portions of the book because I was like, at this point, I'm just annoyed. But that is where I was with this book. So this book overall for this genre, I think delivers what it's meant to deliver. But keep in mind, you're walking into a 5-spice book, a completely crazy male interest who is very gray and has some morally dark edges, and a female character who thinks she's losing her mind and herself is a very interesting character to read, while simultaneously being set against the backdrop of a very deep, very dark, very disturbing thing that does happen in society that really should be dismantled. So we get to see that in this book as well. But again, this is a dark book. I just want to put that out there. Perfect for October though, perfect for November if that's the vibes you're looking for in the fall. And again, I ended up giving this book a 3-star. Now let's talk about the next one. In this book, this is a lot darker. This one honestly was harder for me to read. In this book, our main female lead character does end up getting kidnapped and put into the sex trade herself. She also suffers a lot of trauma, and you do get quite a bit of that trauma in this book. So I would say a solid first 20 chapters of this book, you are watching her go through the horrible things that she goes through with the madam and the crazy people who have kidnapped her, the injuries, the breaks, the complete and total destruction of the sense of self, and just tearing these young women down, putting them in horrible situations. You get to see all of that. So if that's not something you can stomach, I just want to put that out there. You also get to see our main male character just losing his mind, trying to find her, doing everything in his power to get her back. And then finally, when they are reunited, you get to see a completely new side of this female character, given her PTSD and her experiences. And now together, the two of them decide that they're going to go after all of these people that put her through this and slowly take revenge on all of these evil people. And this definitely has more of a dark twist to it. You also get to see a lot more in terms of the sex trade and what's going on within those organizations themselves as they slowly try to dismantle and topple this situation. You also get to hear more from the best friend, who also unfortunately did get kidnapped in the end of the last book, and you get to see a little bit of her side as well. It's much darker than the previous book was. I do think that it was still decently written. I do think that the PTSD could have been talked about in a slightly better way. Again, this is not anything against the author in any way, shape, or form. This is just my experience personally with the book. I can honestly say I did not enjoy this book as well. It definitely haunted me a little bit. There were chapters I had to skip because I simply could not stomach it or handle it. Hearing about these things happen to young women was very difficult for me. That's not something I typically like to tap into, especially with the industry that I work in. So because I am in a medical industry, and that's kind of my job, my primary focus is always, how can I help people? How can I make things better? And so I think this book just really was gut-wrenchingly painful for me to read, especially the first third of the book. But I do think overall it was still a fun book. For the reasons I explained before, though, however, I still ended up giving this a 2-star. Now, that being said, I did finish the book. I did enjoy it overall in terms of the writing style. And I think once the couple is back together, it does get a little bit better. And it was nice to see the human side of our main male character, because he realizes that the woman he loves has been tortured and has gone through hell. And so in the first book, where you get to see his insanity and his ability to just kind of strip her of her independence, in this book you really get to see him building her back up, and you really get to see him being a little bit more supportive while also still being batshit crazy. So I do think that this book was really nice in that regard. But this is a very interesting dynamic, interesting storyline. But if it does sound up your alley, I do think it's perfect for the October season. I think it's very appropriate for that season, honestly. And I did end up giving the entire series overall about a 2.75 to 3. I don't necessarily know if I'll ever tackle these books again. I have to be in a very particular mindset. I'm not quite ready to give up on them or get rid of them, because I do think the overall story was very unique and very fascinating and very interesting in and of itself. But that being said, it is very dark and it is very spicy. Please know you're walking into a dark romance with this duology. And that brings us to the final book of this particular October bookish review, which is none other than Riley Sager's With a Vengeance. The other video that I will be attaching at the end of this one is literally my makeup / Riley Sager review. I ended up going to multiple weddings in October, and so I was having a mental crisis on what to do with my makeup. And so I ended up buying a bunch of new products specifically for the weddings, because one of them was my brother, the other was my best friend, and I was like, I need to look nice. I need makeup that will last from morning to evening. So while playing with the makeup and also trying makeup looks, I also decided to review all the Riley Sager books. So I will definitely put that at the end of this if that sounds like something you might enjoy. It's kind of interspersed, so if you want to skip any portions of the video, please feel free to do so. but this is the newest Riley Sager book that came out. Now, in the same way that I mentioned, I absolutely adore TJ Klune. I really enjoy Riley Sager as a thriller author. I think he just does a phenomenal job with his books, and all of them have slightly different premises. Now, one thing I will say about With the Vengeance is you're following a main female character on a train where she has gathered the people who have caused the complete and total destruction of her family. Her brother died because of them. Her mother died heartbroken because of them. Her father went to jail and died in jail because of them. So she is basically planning on enacting revenge, and her goal is to gather all of these sinners on a train, gather an explanation from them, and basically hand deliver them to the FBI with evidence stacked against them as to how they have framed her father and thereby caused the destruction of their family, while also simultaneously getting close to her and basically ruining her childhood in turn. While she's on this journey of enacting revenge, she realizes that someone else on the train is actively murdering the people on the train. So now she inadvertently finds herself in a position where she has to protect the people that she was trying to bring to justice so that they can all make it to Chicago safely after the 8-hour journey and hand deliver these people to the police. Throughout the course of this book, you get to see some very interesting character development. You get to see some romance, a little bit of it within this book. You also get to see like crazy things happening in terms of the characters and the justifications for why they did the things they did. However, I will say this was very reminiscent of two Agatha Christie books for me. One was 10 Little Indians and then there were none. Both titles for the same book, as well as Murder on the Orient Express. So I do think it was really interesting reading this because I felt like there were pieces that were maybe inspired from this Agatha Christie books, as well as hints of the Queen of Murder herself within this particular book that he had written. But I do think Riley Sager did a good job of handling some of the twists and turns that came throughout the course of the book that made it a little bit more unique than the Agatha Christie books were. But I do definitely think that it took inspiration from those books. So if you are an Agatha Christie lover, then you will probably enjoy this book. If you're a Riley Sager lover, you will probably enjoy this book. If you just want something that is thrilling and fun and fast-paced and you want it for the holiday season, or if you want it for, March or April when it's more rainy, then this is the perfect book for that time. But I will say overall, I did enjoy this book. That being said, because of the reminiscent feeling of it being so closely tied to the Agatha Christie books, it did bother me a little bit that it felt a little deja vu-y for me. So as far as Riley Sager goes, I wouldn't say this is one of my absolute favorites that he's written, but I would say overall the story was enjoyable. It did feel a little bit long to me, exactly for the reasons I mentioned before, which is simply that, again, it felt very reminiscent of those two Agatha Christie books. So because of that, I felt like some of the things I kind of saw coming, like the red herrings and things like that, which I think was very much like cut, copy, paste from those books. But I do think the overall ending, the overall like second half of the book was a little bit different enough from the Agatha Christie books where I still enjoyed this book. So for those reasons, I ended up giving this book a 3-star. I do think that I will continue to read any Riley Sager that ever comes out because I still think he's a brilliant mind. But as far as the Riley Sager books goes, this would probably be lower on the totem pole in terms of my favorites. But I did definitely enjoy this book, and I would still recommend people to pick it up and read it. And if not this one, then any Riley Sager. My personal favorite by him is Lock Every Door. My second favorite by him is The House Across the Lake. All of those books are just absolutely phenomenal, and I think Riley Sager truly has a way of telling a story that is just absolutely brilliant. All right, guys, and that brings us to the end of this video. If you guys made it this far with me, thank you for sticking around. I absolutely love these wrap-up videos. It's a great way for me to also see what I retained from the books, and it really gives me time to process each of the books I read and give as honest opinions and reviews as possible for you guys as well. Please let me know if you enjoyed it. Please let me know if any of these books are on your TBR. Please leave me comments below. If you have read any of these books, what your thoughts were on them. I would love to hear what you guys have to say as well. I am genuinely trying to make this into a community, so that requires all of us to communicate. So please don't hesitate to leave your comments. I love reading them. I love responding to them. If you are new here and you did enjoy this content, I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday on bookish themed content, whether it be vlogs about reading, special editions that have come in, book hauls, reading journeys, what I read in a week, things like that, then that is definitely going to be a place where you will enjoy yourself. So I would love to see you back. If you are returning, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your love. Thank you for helping me build this bookish community. I just love what books represent. And I love the fact that a book that means something to me can mean something different to somebody else. And I like the fact that it sparks conversation and it creates a space where no matter what your background is or where you come from, it's a safe space to talk about books and to also open up our eyes to so many different things that happen in society. So again, I thank you dearly for being here and for supporting me. That being said, I do want to say wherever you guys are, I hope that you guys are safe, that you're feeling loved, that you're enjoying your life and your loved ones. And I hope whether it's morning, evening, or night, you are having a wonderful day with plenty of time to read. And I hope to catch you guys on the next video. Thank you again for being here. Bye, guys.